Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita. We are reading from Adi Lila, chapter 1. We are going to be reading from 91 verse onwards. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum lankayate girim yat kripa tamham vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. The great scripture Srimad Bhagavatam, compiled by Mahamuni Vyasadeva from 4 original verses, describes the most elevated and kind-hearted devotees and completely rejects the cheating ways of materially motivated religiosity. It propounds the highest principle of eternal religion, which can factually mitigate the threefold miseries of a living being and award the highest benediction of full prosperity and knowledge. Those willing to hear the message of this scripture in a submissive attitude of service can at once capture the Supreme Lord in their hearts. Therefore, there is no need for any scripture other than Srimad Bhagavatam. This verse appears in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.2. The words Mahamuni Krite indicate that Srimad Bhagavatam was compiled and by the great sage Vyasadeva, who is sometimes known as Narayan Mahamuni, because he is an incarnation of Narayan. Vyasadeva therefore is not an ordinary man, but is empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He compiled the beautiful Bhagavatam to narrate some of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees. In Srimad Bhagavatam, a distinction between real religion and pretentious religion has been clearly made. According to this original and genuine commentation on the Vedanta Sutra, there are numerous pretentious faiths that pass as religion but neglect the real essence of religion. The real religion of a living being is his natural inborn quality, whereas pretentious religion is a form of nations that artificially covers a living entity's pure consciousness under certain unfavorable conditions. Real religion lies dormant when artificial religion dominates from the mental plane. A living being can awaken this dormant religion by hearing with a pure heart. The path of religion prescribed by Srimad Bhagavatam is different from all forms of imperfect religiosity. Religion can be considered in the following 3 divisions: the path of fruitive work, the path of knowledge and mystic powers, the path of worship and devotional service. I'll repeat. Religion can be considered in the following 3 divisions. First, the path of fruitive work. Second, the path of knowledge and mystic powers. Third, the path of worship and devotional service. The path of fruitive work, the Karam-kand, even when decorated by religious ceremonies meant to elevate one's material condition, is a cheating process because it can never enable one to gain relief from material existence and achieve the highest goal. A living entity perpetually struggles hard to rid himself of the pangs of the material existence, but the path of fruitive work leads him to either temporary happiness or happiness distress, or temporary distress in material existence. By pious fruitive work, one is placed in a position where he can temporarily feel material happiness, whereas vicious activities lead him to a distressful position of material want and scarcity. However, even if one is put into the most perfect situation of material happiness, he cannot in that way become free from the pangs of birth, death, old age and disease. A materially happy person is therefore in need of the eternal relief that mundane religiosity in terms of fruitive work can never afford. The paths of the culture of knowledge, Gyan Marg, and the mystic powers, Yoga Marg, are equally hazardous, for one does not know where one will go by following these uncertain methods. An empiric philosopher in search of spiritual knowledge may endeavor most laboriously for many births in mental speculation, but unless and until he reaches a stage of the purest quality of goodness. In other words, until he transcends the plane of material speculation, it is not possible for him to know that everything emanates from the personality of Godhead Vasudeva. His attachment to the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord makes him unfit to rise to that transcendental stage of Vasudeva understanding, and therefore, because of his unclean state of mind, he glides down again into material existence, even after having ascended to the highest stage of liberation. This fall down takes place due to his want of a locus standi in the service of the Supreme Lord. As far as the mystic powers of the yogis are concerned, they are also material entanglements on the path of spiritual realization. One German scholar who became a devotee of Godhead in India said that material science had already made laudable progress in duplicating the mystic powers of the yogis. He therefore came to India not to learn the methods of the yogis' mystic powers, but to learn the path of transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord, as mentioned in the great scripture Srimad Bhagavatam. Mystic powers can make a yogi materially powerful and thus give temporary relief from the miseries of birth, death, old age, and disease, as other material sciences can also do. But such mystic powers can never be a permanent source of relief from these miseries. Therefore, according to the Bhagavad school, this path of religiosity is also a method of cheating its followers. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly defined that the most elevated and powerful mystic yogi is one who can constantly think of the Supreme Lord within his heart and engage in the loving service of the Lord. The path of worship of the innumerable devas or administrative demigods is still more hazardous and uncertain than the above-mentioned processes of Karam-kand and Gyan-kand. This system of worshipping many gods such as Durga, Shiva, Ganesha, Surya, and the impersonal Vishnu form is accepted by persons who have been blinded by an intense desire for sense gratification. When properly executed in terms of the rites mentioned in the Shastras, which are now very difficult to perform in this age of want and scarcity, such worship can certainly fulfill one's desire for sense gratification, but the success obtained by such methods is certainly transient and is suitable only for a less intelligent person. That is the verdict of the Bhagavad Gita. No sane man should be satisfied by such temporary benefits. None of the above-mentioned three religious paths can deliver a person from the threefold miseries of material existence, namely miseries caused by the body and mind, miseries caused by the living entities, and miseries caused by the demigods. The process of religion described in Srimad Bhagavatam, however, is able to give its followers permanent relief from the threefold miseries. The Bhagavatam describes the highest religious form, reinstatement of the living entity in his original position of transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord, which is free from the infections of desires for sense gratification, fruitive work, and the culture of knowledge, with the aim of merging into the Absolute to become one with the Supreme Lord. Any process of religiosity based on sense gratification, gross or subtle, must be considered a pretentious religion because it is unable to give perpetual protection to its followers. The word projihita is significant. Pra means complete and ujihita means indicates rejection. Religiosity in the shape of fruitive work is directly a method of gross sense gratification, whereas the process of culturing spiritual knowledge with a view to becoming one with the Absolute is a method of subtle sense gratification. All such pretentious religiosity based on gross or subtle sense gratification is completely rejected in the process of Bhagavad Dharma, or the transcendental religion, that is the eternal function of the living being. Bhagavad Dharma, or the religious principle described in Srimad Bhagavatam, of which the Bhagavad Gita is a preliminary study, is meant for liberated persons of the highest order who attribute very little value to the sense gratification of pretentious religiosity, the first and foremost concern of fruitive workers, elevationists, empiric philosophers, and salvationists is to raise their material position. But devotees of Godhead have no such selfish desires. They serve the Supreme Lord only for his satisfaction. Sri Arjun wanted to satisfy his senses by becoming a so-called non-violent and pious man. At first decided not to fight, but when he was fully situated in the principles of Bhagavad Dharma, culminating in complete surrender unto the will of the Supreme Lord, he changed his decision and agreed to fight for the satisfaction of the Lord. He then said, Nashto moha smritir labdha tvat prasadan mayuchyuta sthito smi gata sandeha karishye vachanam tava. My dear Krishna, O infallible one, my illusion is now gone. I have regained my memory by your mercy. I am now firm and free from doubt, and am prepared to act according to your instructions. Bhagavad Gita 18.73. It is the constitutional position of the living entity to be situated in this pure consciousness, and so-called religious process that interferes with this unadulterated spiritual position of the living being must therefore be considered a pretentious process of religiosity. The real form of religion is spontaneous, loving service to Godhead. This relationship of the living being with the absolute personality of Godhead in service is eternal. The personality of Godhead is described as Vastu, or the substance, and the living creature are described as Vastavas, or the innumerable samples of the substance in relative existence. The relationship of the substantive portions with the Supreme Substance can never be annihilated, for it is an eternal quality inherent in the living being. By contact with the material nature, the living entities exhibit varied symptoms of the disease of material consciousness. To cure this material disease is the supreme object of human life. The process that treats this disease is called Bhagavad Dharma, or Sanatan Dharma, real religion. This is described in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, anyone who, because of his background of pious activities in previous lives, is anxious to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, immediately realizes the presence of the Supreme Lord within his heart and fulfills the mission of his life. Verse 92, the foremost process of cheating is to desire to achieve liberation by merging into the Supreme. For this cause, the permanent disappearance of loving service to Krishna. Purport: the desire to merge into the impersonal Brahman is the subtlest type of atheism. As soon as such atheism disguised in the dress of liberation is encouraged, one becomes completely unable to traverse the path of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Verse 93, the prefix pra in the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam indicates that the desire for liberation is completely rejected. This is an annotation by Sridhar Swami, the great commentator on Srimad Bhagavatam. Verse 94, all kinds of activities, both auspicious and inauspicious, that are detrimental to the discharge of transcendental loving service to Lord Sri Krishna are actions of darkness, of ignorance. Purport: the poetical comparison of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda to the sun and moon is very significant. The living entities are spiritual sparks, and their constitutional position is to render devotional service to the Supreme Lord in full Krishna consciousness. So-called pious activities and other ritualistic performances, pious or impious, as well as the desire to escape from material existence, are all considered to be coverings of these spiritual sparks. The living entities must get free from these superfluous coverings and fully engage in Krishna consciousness. The purpose of the appearance of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda is to dispel the darkness of the soul before the appearance of all these superfluous activities of the living entities were covering Krishna consciousness. But after the appearance of these two brothers, people's hearts are becoming cleansed and they are again becoming situated in the real position of Krishna consciousness. Verse 95. By the grace of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, this darkness of ignorance is removed and the truth is brought to light. Verse 96. The absolute truth is Sri Krishna, and loving devotion to Sri Krishna exhibited in pure love is achieved through congregational chanting of the holy name, which is the essence of all bliss. Verse 97. The sun and the moon dissipate the darkness of the external world and thus reveal external material objects like pots and plates. Verse 98. But these two brothers, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, dissipate the darkness of the inner core of the heart, and thus they help one meet the two kinds of Bhagavatas, persons or things in relationship with the personality of Godhead. Verse 99. One of the Bhagavatas is the great scripture Srimad Bhagavatam, and the other is the pure devotee absorbed in the mellows of loving devotion. Verse 100. Through the actions of these two Bhagavatas, the Lord instills the mellows of transcendental loving service into the heart of a living being, and thus the Lord, in the heart of his devotee, comes under the control of devotee's love. Verse 101. The first wonder is that both brothers appear simultaneously, and the other is that they illuminate the innermost depths of the heart. Verse 102. These two, the sun and moon, are very kind to the people of the world. Thus, for the good fortune of all, they have appeared on the horizon of Bengal. Purport: the celebrated ancient capital of the Sena dynasty, which was known as Gaudadesh or Gauda, was situated in what is now the modern district of Malda. Later, this capital was transferred to the ninth or central island on the western side of the Ganges at Navadvip, which is now known as Mayapur, and was then called Gaudapur. Lord Chaitanya appeared there, and Lord Nityananda came there and joined him from the district of Birbhum. They appeared on the horizon of Gaudadesh to spread the signs of Krishna consciousness, and it is predicted that as the sun and moon gradually move west, the movement they began 500 years ago will come to the western civilizations by their mercy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu drive away the 5 kinds of ignorance of the conditioned souls. In the Mahabharata Udyog Parv, 43rd chapter, these 5 kinds of ignorance are described. They are: first, accepting the body to be the self; second, making material sense gratification one's standard of enjoyment; third, by being anxious due to material identification; fourth, lamenting; fifth, thinking that there is anything beyond the absolute truth. The teachings of Lord Chaitanya eradicate these 5 kinds of ignorance. Whatever one sees or otherwise experiences, one should know to be simply an exhibition of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's energy. Everything is a manifestation of Krishna. Verse 103. Let us therefore worship the holy feet of these two lords. Thus one can be rid of all difficulties on the path of self-realization. Verse 104. I have invoked the benediction of the Lords with these 2 verses, verses 1 and 2 of this chapter. Now please hear attentively the purport of the 3rd verse. I purposely avoid extensive description for fear of increasing the bulk of this book. I shall describe the essence as concisely as possible. Verse 106. Essential truth spoken concisely is true eloquence. Verse 107. Simply hearing submissively will free one's heart from the faults of ignorance, and thus one will achieve deep love for Krishna. This is the path of peace. Verse 108 and 109. If one patiently hears about the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Nityananda Prabhu and Sri Advaita Prabhu and their devotees, devotional activities, names and fame, along with the mellows of their transcendental loving exchanges, one will learn the essence of the absolute truth. Therefore, I have described these in the Chaitanya Charitamrita with logic and discrimination. Verse 110. Praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishna Das, narrate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, following in their footsteps. Thus end the Bhakti Vedanta purports to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, first chapter, describing the spiritual masters. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.